Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Donna Feazell, and I'm your host of Donna's Edge Talk Show, where truth matters. Thank you so much for watching every day, Monday through Friday, beginning at 2 p.m. That's on the Eastern Time Zone, as we get to ride home with you in the afternoon. I wanted to thank Fox News for letting us be an affiliate with them. You can find us on television, channel 182 on Charter Communications Abundance Television, syndicated, found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Don't forget the podcast on thenewscasters.com. Go ahead and check that out. You'll find the truth there. I have not been kicked off the first time by using that means as a podcast, and they are growing like crazy. As a matter of fact, Attorney Don Brown is with me right now. He's a candidate, he's an author, he's a speaker. And Don, they have been watching our shows and would like to talk to you about having a podcast. I told them you were running for office. Don't know if you had time for that or not, but anyway, it's a great means, and got people who do all kinds of stuff. So welcome to the show. It's so good to see you today.
Donna, good to be with you this afternoon. Always glad to be with you. And podcast sounds like a fun thing to do. Maybe we do a podcast together or something, but I'm open to anything that it takes to get the message out. And if that's what it takes to get the message out, like Ross Perot said all those years ago, I'm all ears.
And he was in both ways. But yeah, he was a great means of, I voted for him. You know, I told you about that. Yep. And of course, my mom being a Republican, my dad being a Democrat, did not understand that at all. So, but to me,
and Ross Perot jumped into that race with Bush and Clinton and was warning against the things that now have come to pass. And Clinton got elected, and then we had NAFTA, and we had, most favored nation status for China, and we had U.S. entering the World Trade Organization, and we basically created and put our principal military and economic competitor, Communist China, on steroids. Mm-hmm. And I've been campaigning a lot for the U.S. Senate, and as I mentioned, I was in Cabarrus County about 3 weeks ago, and I asked the question, "Where's our textile industry?" And you've been in North Carolina, now you're in South Carolina, Donna, so you know how textile is such a big part of the industry, of the economy in this part of the country. And I was in Winston-Salem in Forsyth County a couple of days later, and I asked, "Where's our furniture industry?" It's all been sucked offshore, and Ross Perot warned against it, and Trump warned against it, I should say. And now look where we are. You can't have a nation, you can't have an economic superpower unless you make things. And we got to bring our industry back. So didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but Ross Perot was right. Trump was right. And now we are seeing the seeds of their very prediction come true, 20 some years later. And we got to right the ship.
I receive a lot of emails. By the way, continue sending those, Donna at donnasedge.com. That's Donna at donnasedge.com. A lot of folks are sending messages. They want to know about tariff, and folks are confused. Okay, so first of all, folks, don't listen to the liberal media. They're going to send you off out in la la land somewhere. So you're a good means. Let's talk about the tariffs. Good thing, bad thing. Is it going to work?
I 1,000% support the president's tariff policy. And one question that I've asked a lot of my audience is how many of y'all went back and how many of y'all saw Joe Rogan's interview with Trump? 3 hours. And for any of your listeners and viewers out there, Donna, who haven't seen or heard that, I recommend going back and watching it. And if you have to break it up in 30-minute segments, do that. Trump shows really, can you imagine, first of all, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or any other Democrat holding their own with Joe Rogan for 3 hours? Yeah. But Trump, for me, watching that interview, my respect for the man just shot off the charts. Not that it wasn't already off the charts, because of having worked with the Trump administration and seen firsthand his work in protecting, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine who were prosecuted under Obama's rules of engagement. But during that interview, he goes from, talking about, nuclear engineering and how we need to follow the French model with smaller reactors. He's talking about 90 rhubarb concrete. I didn't know what 90 rhubarb concrete was. Trump was talking about it and talking about history and the Civil War. And he gets into this thing about tariffs. And during that interview, he points out that during the administration of William McKinley, who was, of course, assassinated, he preceded Teddy Roosevelt, how that the United States had made so much money off tariffs that we had to, McKinley had to form a commission on how to spend the money. And if you stop and think about it, we are trained, many of us have been trained to dislike tariffs just because they tell us that without thinking about it. But during the period of time, Donna, between 1880 and 1913, when I believe we made a mistake by passing the 16th Amendment to impose the income tax on people. And we passed the Income Tax Act in 1913, the first permanent Income Tax Act, which I think needs to be repealed, by the way. It's another topic. During that period of time, from 1880 to 1913, the United States experienced its greatest industrial revolution in history. And we did so without an income tax. We did so only with tariffs. And there were jobs galore. Now, do we have some problems that need to be dealt with, and with workplace conditions in certain instances? Yes. But the economy exploded, and that laid the groundwork based upon tariffs for the U.S. Industrial Revolution that allowed us to win World War I and II. Thank you. My assistant just brought me a cup of caffeine, which I need to keep me going. It's okay. With Republican Red here. But the point is that a tariff, is not a tax, a direct tax on Americans. And it is a tax on foreign goods brought into the United States. Somebody told me they saw an interview with President Reagan years ago saying he didn't like tariffs. Well, I don't think anybody likes a tariff inherently, but President Reagan made that comment before the Democrats brought in NAFTA and before the Democrats brought in most favored nations status for China, and before we invented the World Trade Organization, before we gave our competitors an edge up on us. And so tariffs used selectively are a great thing. What was not true when Reagan made that statement, that it is true now, is that we have given China, they tax our goods at 50 and 100%, and we let their goods come in for nothing. The same thing with the European Union, the same thing with the Canadians. The numbers vary depending on the country, but we have created an uneven international trading scheme after NAFTA that has resulted in the United States flushing its industry out of this country overseas. Why should they be making socks in Brazil or Venezuela or Cambodia or Vietnam? Why should the textile industry be transferred to these countries? Why is it that we in the United States developed the microchip, the most significant, probably the most significant computer-related development, because now we can take computers from the microchip. They used to be as big as a house and move it down. I'm talking to you on a small computer and vice versa. We can talk to each other on our phones. We invented the microchip, and now we produce about 8% of them. In other words, 92% of all microchips are done overseas. That's because we have enacted these stupid, dumb trade policies. President Trump's tariffs are designed to right the ship. So I support this 100%. We have to bring back American manufacturing. Wall Street doesn't care about the United States. All Wall Street cares about, all the New York Stock Exchange cares about, is the bottom line on profits. So New York Stock Exchange is happy if we have cheap labor in China and Indonesia and Cambodia and Vietnam, places like that, developing products with basically slave wages, which drives their profit up, but it flushes out American jobs and flushes out American industry. It will kill the United States. So tariffs are a good thing, not a bad thing. I mean, you want to make sure they're used strategically and used importantly, like the president has. The Secretary of the Treasury has said we have 17 proposed deals on the table now since Trump announced these tariffs, and the drop in the stock market is evaporating. The stock market's going back up. So it's a powerful tool. I believe, Don, that we need to move to a situation where there is zero income tax. One of the things I've been seeing on the campaign trail is that not only must we, wage war on the deep state, that means reducing the number of administrative agencies by at least 2/3. But not only do we need to take out the Department of Education, what is worthless, but we need to take out the Internal Revenue Service as well. Take it out and end the permanent income tax on folks. You shouldn't be taxed because of your labor, Donna, and in the corporate income tax. And if we have to replace it at all, then I would go with something that what Governor Huckabee's talking about, with like this fair tax, where you're taxed at the point of purchase with a maximum of 5%. But I wouldn't even go with that until it's absolutely necessary that we're needed. I want to see us go back to where we were at the turn of the last century, where there is zero income tax on individuals and zero on corporations. The federal government was never meant to be, we the people, that is, when the Constitution was passed and signed and they're ratified, were never meant to be forced to have an interaction with the federal government. Well, the Income Tax Act, we're forced to do that. We're forced to fill out a 1040 or a 1041 if you're a trust or an estate, or an 1120, whatever it might be. We're forced to have interaction with them. That was never meant to be the case. If we don't fill these forms out, we can be prosecuted for failure to file. If we do fill a form out and make even an innocent mistake, they could prosecute us for tax fraud, whether we have made, whether it was intentional or not. It happens all the time. That must come to an end. This income tax system, this depressive income tax system, must come to an end. And tariffs do two things. One, it gives us an opportunity to get revenue from overseas, and two, it helps us to bring American manufacturing back. So I support the president 100%. There's no need to be afraid of tariffs. The old guard wants to keep them because the old guard is content with flushing American industry overseas. And the old guard is content with bringing up its bottom line in its stock portfolio because of cheap labor elsewhere. That is cheap labor that used to be American jobs, while our people, they don't want a middle class in this country. So I totally favor and totally support the president in his tariff efforts. We have nothing to be afraid of here. What we have to do is cut and eliminate the personal and corporate income tax, in my opinion.
I'm glad you mentioned slave labor, because that was a time I loved Liz Claiborne clothes. I mean, that was my favorite. That was always my brand right there because of the way I'm built. I got large shoulders, it just fits me better. But I've just noticed the quality is down because they're using cheap labor. Okay, the quality of designer brands have went down here in the United States as well because it's all being shipped overseas. It just makes common sense. We know why. We know why the big money is all against tariffs. It's because they get the cheap labor. Again, I might as well go to Walmart and buy my clothes. It's almost the same. I'm just not seeing the benefits anymore of paying for designer clothes.
Well, right. And Donna, like my granddaddy used to say, and my grandmommy also used to say, you get what you pay for. And if you pay for cheap labor, you can get a quality that reflects slave labor. Slave labor is the correct term. But Donna, it comes down to this, as I've shared everywhere on the campaign trail, there's a great philosophical dividing line under which this country will rise and fall. And on one side, you have America First. That's America First, which is undergirded by the United States Constitution, which is further undergirded by what we call a biblical worldview philosophy. That's on one side. On the other side, you have globalism. You have globalism, which is undergirded by George H.W. Bush's New World Order, something they call the Humanist Manifesto, saying that man is inherently good, and all these things. And so this slave labor thing, where our jobs are flushed overseas to destroy American manufacturing, is part of globalization. It's part of globalism. Now, it's fine to have trade with other countries as long as that trade is balanced and fair. But what's happened beginning in the early 1990s, especially with the Democrats shoving NAFTA down our throats, with the cooperation of some Republicans, I must say, what's happened is we flushed our jobs away. We made a pivot to globalism, and you can't have a great nation if there's globalism. Our standard of living, once we lose the U.S. dollar, will drop as fast as Britain's did. So we've got to save American manufacturing, and we've got to bring it back. And I'm saying if you end the income tax and if you end the corporate tax, you want to see American jobs flush back into this country, they'll flash back into this country so fast, it'll make your head spin. And our unemployment issues will evaporate. We will make so much money that we won't, like with the tariff situation back during the McKinley administration, we won't know what to do with the money. And the solution here, Donna, is to cut government. Government must live within its means. Article 1, Section 8 sets out a limited number of proper roles for government in the Constitution. And but unfortunately, beginning during the administration of Franklin Roosevelt with first of all, the New Deal, and then we come in with LBJ with the Great Society, and then with Obama, we have Obamacare. These are three huge government takeovers. Through Obamacare, they tried to extend Medicare again as a means of government takeover. And then you had the Green New Deal. And it's like Elon Musk said, I read that he said the other day about these NGOs that have been taking governmental money. NGOs will come out with some sort of altruistic purpose, save the children, save the whales. Well, they never say of any children or anything else, but the liberals and the government throw money into these NGOs, and the NGOs turn around and give money to Democrat causes. You see, the Democrats use these names like, the New Deal and the Great Society and the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's all a bunch of hocus pocus because the effect of what they're doing is exactly the opposite of what they're calling it. So we've got to slim government down. I mean, radically. And Donna, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, and with the Republican Congress for these 2 years, has stopped the bleeding temporarily. I mean, we were on the verge of tyranny. I could go into that, but we stopped the bleeding temporarily, and we're cutting spending. But Donna, we got to go even further. We have to wage war. We have to take these agencies out. Now, I'm glad that the administration is doing everything it can through executive orders, et cetera, for example, to defang and defund the Department of Education. But the Department of Education was rammed down our throats in the Jimmy Carter administration in 1980, in the year before Ronald Reagan was sworn in. So Congress created the monster. Congress must end the monster. So let's see if our Republican Congress is going to put its money where its mouth is and end the Department of Education legislatively by law. Well, the same thing is true with the IRS, the EPA. You go down and down and down, go on and on and on. These are functions that must be returned to the states, and especially with the IRS. We don't need that at all. It needs to go. We're going to see if our Congress has the guts. But Donna, this isn't what we're talking about with this election coming up in 2026. It's not just a question of, in the U.S. Senate in North Carolina, who's going to have the president's back. Our current senior senator has stabbed him on the back on multiple occasions, most recently now trying to torpedo the president's U.S. attorney pick for D.C., and it goes on and on and on and on. But it's more than just who's going to have the president's back for the next 2 years. Our next U.S. senator will serve 4 years after the end of the Trump administration. But Donna, this isn't a question of 2 years or 4 years. This is a question of 40 years. Our people have to understand that if we're going to take this country back, we have to take the state down. We have to eliminate these agencies. We have to eliminate most of them. I'm calling for elimination of 2/3 of all federal employees that are not military. The military is a legitimate function of government. Most of the rest of the junk is not. But that's where we start. We've got to take this deep state down so that we no longer have this huge monolithic administrative army of bureaucrats that are making laws and regulations. Last night I was speaking over in Rowan County, and I had a guy who's a farmer. He said, listen, I can't go dig a ditch on my own land because the EPA won't let me do it. I said, sir, it's probably bureaucrats within the EPA that have made these laws and regulations above me on what Congress has done. But that's an example of how it's affecting our people. And we've got to hit it hard. And I'm hoping and trusting that we will.
I'm pretty sure you will. I wanted to mention something. Okay, you guys, I don't know if you know this, but I'm pretty sure you do. There's an exodus of people leaving North Carolina going to South Carolina. With the number, I'll take you 2 big reasons. Okay, my son and daughter-in-law are 2 that are leaving. And the reason they're doing that is because of the high taxes, that they're not like your governor at all. This is such a Libby guy. But it's taxes. Okay, so they have a townhouse. And they went from paying just under $1,000 15 years ago yearly on the taxes. Now it's almost $3,000. That's incredible. And I'm so glad about the platform of fair tax. I mean, this is one way to end that. And then also you have to think about heredity tax. Okay, right. So, wow. A lot of folks are losing their family farms because of this. They're going out of business because they can't afford it. Okay, so let's just say you have a family farm, 200 acres, whatever, and the kids can't afford to buy it. It's just, and then someone has to be the hero, hopefully, to keep the farm, but they're having to buy everybody else out. It's murky. We need to keep family farms. What are your takes on that?
Well, I think that the property taxes should be eliminated as well. Why should you? If you own a family farm or own a home, and the government's saying if you don't pay us money for it, we're going to take it away, you don't really own it. It's got to come to an end. Now, these are primarily state and local issues as opposed to federal issues when you're looking at property taxes. We need to wage war against property taxes also. And you mentioned the estate tax. There should be no estate tax. The intergenerational transfer of wealth is something that the deep state bureaucrats and Democrats don't want to happen. They want to bust up intergenerational transfers of wealth because that threatens their status quo and their power. But it's interesting because we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. 1776 1 year from now, we will be at the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're already coming up on the 250th anniversary this year of the beginning of the American Revolution itself. And the battle cry of the American Revolution was taxation without representation. And it's interesting how we've come full force. We've got to go to war against unfair taxation on all fronts. On the federal front, the federal income tax and corporate tax must go. And on the state and local front, these property taxes need to be eliminated altogether. And the state should have no right to come take your property. It's your property. It's not the state's property. The Constitution says that no state or the United States can deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And that's a deprivation of property, of property without due process, if you ask me. So we've got to go to war on taxes. We are once again at a place where our mantra and our battle cry must be taxation without representation. Let's take out the taxation.
Absolutely. You mentioned North Carolina, textile industries that were lost. Same thing. I saw Fort Payne, Alabama. They were a very small town. The group Alabama made it famous, started bringing in sock mills. And some of them were big plants and some were cottage plants. But I'm going to tell you, that town was thriving. Then when NAFTA comes in, guess what? It's a ghost town again. They can't seem to make it without the textiles.
Well, I mean, there was a textile industry at one point, and making socks is an honorable thing. We need socks. I'm wearing socks right now. I can't ever find my socks. I can find them. One sock doesn't match the other one. But why should those socks be manufactured in China or somewhere? These are American jobs that have been deprived of our communities. If you think about that town you were talking about in Alabama, and I grew up in a town, some of that, Plymouth, North Carolina, was a large warehousing plant. We had nearly 3,000 employees at one point. After NAFTA, it shrunk down. Warehouses sold it. I think a company called Domtar bought it to less than 500 employees, I'm told now. Mm-hmm. And that hurts local economies, especially if middle class America and small towns. Of course, that's what the globalists want. They want the end of the middle class. You got to have these manufacturing jobs in order to sustain the middle class. And there's no decent work that's not honorable. The idea of the governor of North Carolina or other Democrats telling you during a manufactured, quote unquote, pandemic that, stay home if your job isn't essential. Who are you to tell me my job isn't essential? Who are you, Governor Cooper, or any Democrat, Joe Biden, to tell any American that their job is not essential? That's about as communistic and dictatorial as I can think of. You don't have the right to make that decision. These jobs are important. Now, listen, there are those who say, well, let's go to a more modern economy, making microchips, blah. Well, we're not making microchips. That's been shipped off
over there too. Yeah, that's
correct. And not everybody is capable, can't always get trained and shouldn't have to do that. We've got to have middle America, recommitted to the trades. It was the trades, it was the brick masons and the the welders and the pipe fitters and the electricians, and the carpenters who built this nation and made the greatest nation on earth. And we have to have a refocus on bringing those jobs back and manufacturing jobs in industries and industrial plants. My granddaddy Hardison, he worked at Weyerhaeuser back when it was called Kekeffer, and he was a foreman keeping the boilers operating. Mm-hmm. And that's honorable work. And that job's gone forever. My granddaddy, of course, went to see Jesus a number of years ago. But you see my point. These industrial jobs are important to middle America. And therefore, they're important to America because there's nothing more important to America than middle America and the middle class. Let's be clear about this. And we have got to say the middle class. And the economic policies of the Democrats and of the globalists and of the Wall Street tycoons have been anti-middle class. The billionaires have gotten richer and richer, but these jobs in these small towns have gone with a wind, and it only hurts our nation. And our trade policies, including the strategic use of tariffs, must be implemented in order to try to help save the middle class and save middle America and save our manufacturing jobs. And the president has the guts to do this and the courage to do it and the vision to do it. And I stand behind him 1,000% in this regard.
Absolutely. Let's go into a commercial break. Man, that was perfect timing. We'll be right back. Let's talk a little bit about the military when we come back. And by the way, thank you for your service. We'll be right back. Twin City Used Car Sales has been serving drivers in the Northeast Alabama area for years with a quality selection of late model used cars, SUVs, and pickup trucks. On top of our extensive selection and competitive prices, we offer professional auto financing services for used car buyers of all credit levels. Whether you've just begun your search or you're ready to secure your next vehicle, at Twin City Used Car Sales, you will drive away with the vehicle of your dreams. The sales and finance staff at Twin City Used Car Sales looks forward to serving you, and you can apply for financing online before your visit to our used dealership in Gadsden, Alabama. Check us out on the web at twincityusedcars.com or go by our location at 901 First Avenue, Gadsden, Alabama. We sincerely look forward to serving you. At Lamone's Mexican Restaurant, located in Henniger, Alabama, and voted Best Mexican Restaurant of DeKalb County, Alabama 2020, we're here to serve you with authentic Mexican cuisine. Order easily online by going to lamonsmex.com or call 256-657-3999 to place your order. We're open Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whether you're celebrating a cozy date night for two or a celebration for a crowd, at Lamone's you'll love our atmosphere and friendly servers. Thank you for dining with Lamone's Mexican Restaurant.
Are you ready?
We all wonder what tomorrow will bring. But the future lays itself at the feet of the prepared and surrenders to the will of the persistent. It's not easy, but today shapes you so you can shape tomorrow. With Northeast Alabama Community College, when the future asks if you're ready, you can answer.
Yes.
Begin your future at Northeast Alabama Community College.
Donna's Designs offers a line of handmade memorial, wedding, and keepsake jewelry that launched back in 1970. I'm a self-trained jewelry designer, and I will work closely with you to create unique designs you can love and treasure for years to come. Whether that be flowers that were used in a funeral arrangement or stones you found on the beach at a memorable trip, call me at 256-659-4319, and let's think of the possibilities. Good afternoon. We are back. My name is Donna, and I'm your host of Donna's Edge Talk Show, where truth matters. Remember, you can find us on television, syndicated, found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire, and that's through Abundant Television. Thank you, Rob. As a matter of fact, Rob Patz is the owner of the station, and he is worldwide now. He owns a number of radio and television stations all across the United States, but I think this one's his pet. I think he really likes this one. And you can find us all over television that way on syndicated, again, Abundant Television, and also the Newscaster Studio, which has my heart as well. And you can find us through all the social media sites, all of those. And thank you again so much, Abbeville, South Carolina. You guys are giving us a great, big, warm welcome, and we definitely appreciate that. Glad we moved. And it's just so good to be back in God's country again. You know, we lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was my heart, too. Charlotte had my heart for about 9.5 years. And it's so good to be close to my friends there as well. Yeah, they're perking out. And they're listening to you, Don Brown, who is a candidate, U.S. Senate, and also he owns his own business. He's an attorney, author, and a speaker. And let's talk a little bit about your books before we dig back in again. How can folks find your writings?
Thank you, Donna. Well, you can go to DonBrownBooks.com. You go to Amazon.com and type in Don Brown. We had our latest, we have had 16 books published, many with major publishers. The most recent was Kangaroo Court, released just in October, right before the election. And it outlines, it's a history beginning in the 1990s of how the Democrats had just gone hog wild with political lawfare, bastardizing our courts, And we covered the Trump prosecutions, and in that book, I predicted they would unravel, and they have unraveled since then, because they were never, not one was constitutionally sound. But that book talks about, on the campaign trail, I talk about how close we came to tyranny, and the election of Donald Trump stopped that for the time being. Anyway, we should be grateful for that. But the book talks about how other political figures were prosecuted, like Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, prosecuted simply for vetoing a bill, which he was allowed to do under the Texas Constitution. There was the former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell, and his wife, who were prosecuted by the same Jack Smith, went after Trump, prosecuted the governor for accepting a gift. It was a small gift he was given, which was allowable under Virginia law if reported. The governor complied with Virginia law. They went after him, the feds, for extortion, of all things. That was reversed unanimously by the Supreme Court. But it also talks about not just how politicians have been the victims of Democrats, but Americans, ordinary Americans. I'll talk about Patricia and Mark McCloskey. They were the couple in St. Louis who were minding their own business during the George Floyd riots. All of a sudden, a thug mob burst through iron gates in their private community, breaking the law by breaking through those gates, walking through their front yard. The McCloskeys come out, simply hold guns and nothing else. And this George Soros prosecutor, Kim Gardner, goes after them. And Mrs. McCloskey, Mr. McCloskey, Mark had an AR-15 he was holding. Miss McCloskey had a revolver. The revolver, Donna, was jammed. It wouldn't even fire. So this communist prosecutor had her staff re-engineer the guns that would fire so she could prosecute. We talk about Douglas Mackey, who was a cartoonist who during the last election in 2016 drew this cartoon lampooning Hillary voters. And we should have lampooned Hillary voters. They're pretty dumb. 5 years later, in 2021, the communist, corrupt DOJ prosecuted this guy for a cartoon under Biden. And there are others as well. So that book is one that's just come out, and hopefully it will do some good. But go to DonBrownBooks.com and go to Amazon.com. And by the way, we would appreciate your support in this U.S. Senate race. We need all the money we can get. We know that most of our folks, our average folks, cannot give the maximum of $3,500. We appreciate if we can get it, but I'd rather have 1 million folks give me $5 than 2 folks give me $1 million. So go please to brown4nc.com. That is brown4nc.com. And if you can sign up to help our campaign, great. You can chip in a little bit. We'd appreciate it. This case is going to be we the people versus they the establishment. And I'm on the side of we the people. So we appreciate all your listeners and viewers, Don. I appreciate you as well.
No, absolutely. We appreciate you. And I'm just telling you, folks, all of my friends who live in North Carolina, this is the guy you need to vote for. I'm just telling you, because he's got you back. And I know that person we're friends. And so, again, thank you for all you do. And thank you for your military experience as well.
Well, I would do it all over again. I love the U.S. Navy. One of the hardest decisions I ever had to make was whether to stay in, because I was on probably pretty fast track and think I would probably become captain. I don't know about admiral, but I was at the Pentagon and had to make a decision to stay or go. And it was one of the hardest decisions. And sometimes I wonder what if, but I love the Navy. I love the military. Pete Hegseth is a personal friend, although I haven't talked to him since he has been, sworn in. But he and I worked together on several military cases during the Obama years and into the Trump years to get guys out of prison that had been wrongfully prosecuted, court-martialed under Obama's restrictive rules of engagement. So the military is near and dear to my heart. Is one of the few agencies that is constitutionally authorized. And what a lot of folks don't realize is that the U.S. Army, June 14th, 1775, the U.S. Navy, October 13th, 1775, the U.S. Marine Corps, born on November 10th, 1775, all predate not just the Constitution, but also the Declaration of Independence. They are cherished institutions that we must protect. The leftists try to bring them down through all these woke rules and foolishness. But right now, with Pete Hegseth in charge of the Department of Defense and with a commander-in-chief like Donald Trump, we've seen a reversal in recruitments. Recruitments are now going through the roof again. And we got a lot to be thankful for. But I do love the military, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to plug it.
Oh, absolutely. So what changes are you seeing right now that President Trump is in office? I know a lot of positive changes within the military. People seem to be more proud to be in the military now.
Well, yeah. And one of the things the president before in 2016 and 17 and now campaigned on removing woke from the military and removing transgender recruitment and transgender surgeries. The first thing that went was DEI, boom, gone, day one. In fact, here in North Carolina, the Democrats changed the name of probably our greatest Army installation at Fort Bragg to Fort Liberty, but because Braxton Bragg, the original namesake, had been a Confederate general. This was the case with a lot of our military bases, Fort Lee and others. But the Army didn't, veterans didn't think much of that. And Pete Hegseth comes in on day one in a press conference at the Pentagon and starts calling it Fort Bragg. And by day three, signed an order to rename it Fort Bragg and named it not after the Confederate general, but after a soldier in World War I who had won the Silver Star. It's a pretty brilliant move. So we got our Fort Bragg back. DEI has been gone. We have fired a number of generals and admirals who bought into Obama's DEI BS. The president has been fighting off this unconstitutional lawfare. There was a judge in D.C., Judge Reyes, who tried to order him to stop his transgender ban. But, the Constitution gives the authority for the commander-in-chiefship of the U.S. military to the president. The courts have zero role at all, either in the military affairs or in immigration affairs. They have meddled themselves into that, and we've allowed them to do it. They got to be slapped back and slapped back hard for that. But we're seeing a military that's more streamlined, that morale is back up, recruiting is back up, and Pete Hegseth is the man for the job. I believe he will be our greatest Secretary of Defense, and I'm proud to know him.
Let's talk about the educational system. This went to pot. I've just got to tell you. And so I've been, you and I love to dig in, and see the real truth that's going on with things. And so a number of folks are coming out saying, that basically it was a popular thing to do to change your gender. Parents lost control of that, and so many of them were told the wrong thing. They were told, oh, I'm a boy, I think I'm a girl. I'm a girl, I think I'm a boy. I'll be able to have those pleasures being a boy or girl in sexual situations. That's not true. As a matter of fact, they lose all of any kind of a pleasure that they think they're getting from that. Why such a lie, and why parents had absolutely no control over this?
Well, that is one of the most extreme examples of woke ideology and culture. The whole notion that a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy, and you're pushing the idea it's okay to have changes and pushing the idea that parents have no role in it. Understand that this whole notion of centralizing education under federal control is where this cancer began to grow. When you think about central committees, that's just communist stuff. And the whole goal of the left is to bust up the nuclear family based on Judeo-Christian values as we've known it. And what better way to bust up the nuclear family based upon Judeo-Christian values than one, to purvey this lie that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, and it's okay for some swimmer to call himself Leah Thomas and compete against Riley Gaines, or to encourage kids to step forward with this type of garbage without parental consent or knowledge. You see, the government wants to be the nanny state. The government wants to do away with the role of parents in traditional family and be the parent itself. Hillary Clinton clearly signaled this evil years ago in her book, It Takes a Village. No, it takes parents in the church. It doesn't take a village at all. But what she really meant is it takes the government. And so this is the most extreme example, probably, or one of the most extreme examples that we've seen of the woke ideology. And the thing about it is, it's so crazy, everything they do is crazy, is the Democrats are still embracing this BS. And somebody said the other day, in fact, I was watching, I don't know, it was someone on Fox, it might have been Laura Ingraham or someone. No, it was Dana Perino who was saying that even when the president's numbers may drop a little bit, then they come back up. They may drop because people get scared about tariffs, and then they come back up. But the Democrats' numbers have not come up at all. And that's because they continue to embrace this garbage. And we got to be bold about calling it garbage. There was a while our people were afraid of saying anything at all because they'd be afraid of being called a racist. You can oppose transgender surgeries and get called a racist. Mm-hmm. You can oppose centralized education through a communistic Department of Education, which seeks to force standards on people and still be called a racist. Our people were fearful of that. We're seeing that change now, but there's no rhyme, reason, or logic to what they do except what their agenda is, and that's to destroy the nuclear family and to destroy the Judeo-Christian principles undergirding the nuclear family in this nation, and to take control and decision-making away from parents. That's really what is at the bottom of all this. And if you can get, you're getting school administrators buying into this garbage, and when administrators buy into this garbage, they need to go, and we need to be very strong about that. I'm very, I've worked with Moms for Liberty, and I'm very supportive of what Moms for Liberty has done around the country, and they have been at the vanguard and at the forefront of attacking a lot of this woke garbage, including this particular issue that you brought up. They're a great organization for anybody to support. I want folks to think about supporting your local Moms for Liberty chapter. They're at the forefront of attacking, and we have to attack this locally. We also have to attack it at the state and federal levels, and I certainly will attack it with a vengeance at the federal level if given the privilege of serving there.
Well, that leads us right into women's rights. And this is Donna Feazell, personal feelings about this. We've been taken back 100 years, maybe even longer than that, because so many women, okay, you're in a beauty contest and a dude can win a beauty contest. This is incredible. Sports, a dude can win a woman's sports. That makes absolutely no sense. And I don't understand all the bra burners from the 70s, the 60s and the 70s. Why aren't they just totally upset about this? Marches. They need to be marching in the streets right now.
Well, Donna, as I've said to you and others, you're applying a logical paradigm to that, which is illogical. Understand that this radical, woke, nuclear feminist type of agenda, which pits men against women in women's sports, which forces little girls to have to worry about having some dude step into the bathroom with them. That's being pushed by the ideologues. That's being pushed by the power structure of the Democrat Party. And it's interesting because I heard of a young mother the other day in her 30s who wasn't particularly politically active at all, but was concerned about her little daughter having to compete against boys and voting Republican because of that. Mm-hmm. It's like somebody said, keep it up, Democrats, with this garbage you're pushing, because it's basically strengthening the conservative movement in this nation. They've really gone off the bandwagon with this, but you're right, they set women's rights back. And the irony is the Democrat Party has always called itself the party of women, even though the first Supreme Court justice was appointed by Ronald Reagan, Sandra Day O'Connor, and you can go right down the list over and over again. But really, the Democrat Party has waged war against women, they try to light the flame of abortion, and the abortion issue is kind of down on the totem pole. And that's not really a women's rights issue anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But nonetheless, they try to make it that. But they have certainly waged war against women by forcing men into women's restrooms, by forcing men into women's sports, and by forcing women to compete in a manner that is going to be unfair, because these males that can't win in the male competition are many times naturally stronger, like this Leah Thomas, whatever. I don't remember what his real name was. Lee Thomas, I suppose, the University of Pennsylvania swimmer that calls himself a girl and competed in swimming. And so they are, the devil sometimes is blind to his own schemes, and they are certainly blind to the amount of damage they're doing to the women's rights movement in this nation, and also to their former affiliation with the Democrat Party, which is really unraveling in large part because of this foolishness.
Something you can, and there are a lot of guys who put a lot of makeup on to try to look like a woman. And from a distance, they probably do. And I'll just mention this. Phil and I were on a trip, our wedding anniversary last year. Went to San Antonio, going into the hotel to check in. And first glance at the front desk, I thought, it was a pretty girl. And as I got closer, I saw the 5 o'clock shadow, and it was still in the morning hours. So I'm like, sweetheart, you can put all the makeup on you want. You're still a dude.
Well, like they say in my parish, you can put lipstick on a pig. All you want is still a pig. And but that's a psychological issue. I mean, people would adopt that. It used to be, when I was in the military, you did that sort of thing. You'd be thrown right out so fast to make your head spin based on a psychological disorder. Uh-huh. During the Biden years, they were encouraging that BS in the military, because ultimately their goal was to weaken the military from within. But that kind of crap is a psychological disorder, and it's time for the DSM, that is that is the manual for the diagnosis of mental and psychological disorders, to once again recognize this sort of thing as a psychological disorder, because that's exactly what it is, Donna.
Well, the show MASH, Klinger always trying to get out of the Army dressed up like a woman, right? I'm surprised they air those reruns. That's a shocker.
Well, it is a shocker. I mean, I'm surprised as well, and Klinger in that was trying to play the system because he knew the Army would throw him out. He never could quite get him to do that in the show, but that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to game the system. Now he'd be put on, I mean, not now, but during the Biden years, he would be put on the cover of the U.S. Army magazine. He'd be trumpeted as a hero, as a pioneer, blah, 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 because he's wearing women's clothes in a male environment. And so, but that's coming to an end. I think I mentioned to you, I'm aware of one paratrooper unit during the last year of the Biden administration. Within just a few weeks after Israel being invaded, this unit was in Europe, and they were given operational plans possibly to go into the Middle East, depending on what Hezbollah might have done out of Lebanon. But within 2 weeks of that, the Biden administration, the Army under the Biden administration, I should say, sends a dude wearing high heels and pantyhose into the middle of a paratrooper of a combat unit. Now, how are you supposed to uphold good order and discipline with that type of crap going on? But this is part of the Democrat ideology, and it's got to be destroyed. This ideology must be destroyed and burned in the ash heap of history.
Let's talk healthcare issues, because I'm just telling you, it's not affordable at all. And so you have to hope you're reasonably healthy, which is why I grow herbs and that kind of thing. And I basically cook everything we eat. Now, I enjoy going out to eat. I'm just saying I'm very careful about what we eat, the foods that we bring into our body, because I'm thinking long term here. If you have health insurance, you either have to have a very high deductible to afford it, or, if you're reasonably healthy, or you're paying. I mean, a lot of folks are having to choose between food and insurance.
Right. And Donna, as I've said in earlier times, the Democrats call something which is exactly the opposite of what it really is. So, for example, Obamacare, called the Affordable Care Act, really was nothing but the Astronomical Cost Act, because it's destroyed the ability of middle-class Americans to be able to afford Blue Cross. And I say Blue Cross because Blue Cross at one time was kind of the gold standard for small businesses and for families. I mean, even if you weren't working with a big Fortune 500 corporation, usually you could afford some sort of policy. But after the ACA came along, and of course the Republican Congress failed to kill it when McCain did this number, shame on them. The cost of healthcare is skyrocketed through the roof. This is a big scam from the beginning between big insurance, and the Democrat Party to try to force people to buy insurance. They did do away with the mandatory purchase clause, but it has forced folks to pay for insurance costs for the uninsured. That's why the cost has gone up astronomically. And one thing that I think would be a good solution for the cost of healthcare is antitrust, as far as I'm concerned. If you think about it, Donna, one of the reasons that you and I have more options with our car insurance is because there aren't monopolies in South Carolina or Alabama or North Carolina. I mean, we're trying to shop for our auto company. I can look at USAA, who I'm still with, or I can look at State Farm, look at Allstate, look at Kemper. It goes down the line. There's more competition. The cost is manageable. But in most states, you got Blue Cross and maybe one other, and that's it. So these big insurance conglomerates, just like these big social media companies, need to be busted up. And the American people need better options, because really what Obamacare has done is destroyed realistic medical options or affordable medical options for the middle class. I may have mentioned this to you before, Donna, but I remember my mom during the last 4 months of her life. My sister and I were with her every day in the hospital. She was in the hospital in Greenville, North Carolina, at Vidant, great hospital, for a couple of months in the cardiac wing. And when they got to a point they couldn't feel like they could do anything else, she was referred to a cardiologist in Chapel Hill at UNC Hospital, transferred up there. I was with her, or my sister was with her every day for the last 4 months of her life. And one thing we noticed, we got to be friends with a lot of nurses, and I love teachers and nurses Teachers and nurses are among the most sought of the earth profession that we have. But these nurses were frustrated because rather than being able to spend time with the patients like they instinctively wanted to do, they were out in the hallway and they were like punching in codes on computers. That's because Obamacare was requiring them to document everything with specific regulatory, jackbootedness, and it was taking up all their day and taking away time from the patients. And of course, it's also driving the cost up. But aside from driving the cost up, can anybody say that the quality to access, the access to quality medical care has gotten better since Obamacare? No. You got to wait and wait and wait. There's a lot of similarities now between what we have here and what they had in Britain. It's not quite as bad here, but you can't get immediate access to, oftentimes you cannot get immediate access to needed health care because of the regulatory constraints that Obamacare has put on everything. We need to bring antitrust against these large insurance companies. We need to bust them up. We need to repeal Obamacare, and we need to make it so that the marketplace for affordable health care insurance can become competitive again. It's kind of like whether it's a monopolistic educational monopoly or healthcare, insurance monopoly. Monopolies are not good. I've told this story many times, but my son, when he was in Germany, in fact, he was in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne. I could pick up my phone and we could talk Facebook time, for as long as we wanted. It didn't cost me anything extra. If that had been 50 years ago, it'd cost me $500. And why is it no longer that expensive? And why is it affordable? Because Ma Bell was busted up by antitrust. Trust solution needs to be taken to these big insurance companies, and of course, it needs to be taken to these large social media conglomerates as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's incredible, and now I'm always open. Even now, I'm open. If a Democrat comes up with an idea, I want to hear it. I really do, because there might be one day who comes up with a great idea. But when this whole thing happened with Obamacare, and I saw Joe Biden hugging Obama. And when, open mic, by the way, he didn't have enough brains to watch what he was saying. And when he hugged him and he whispered in his ear, "This is a big effing deal," that's when my ears pricked.
Right, yeah. And it was that because Joe Biden understood a big effing deal in that it means more governmental takeover of private industry. In this case, governmental takeover through regulations of the healthcare industry. And it's all
more
about
money went into his personal pocket as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Isn't that something, the way that happens? Whether it's Obamacare, the Green New Deal, whatever it is, whatever scheme these Democrats pass, they'll call it something. Oh, it's for the children. It's for education. I mean, you tell me one school kid that was ever taught calculus or history or geometry or French or Spanish or geography by some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. working for the Department of so-called, I should say, Department of Education, but because they say it's for the children, you got a lot of people out there just believe what they say. That's the problem, is we believe what they say. We've got to be more, cunning. Like the Bible says, as gentle as lambs are sheep, but as wise as serpents. We got to be wiser about what they're telling us. But when Biden said that, I remember it specifically. They understood it meant more governmental control and takeover, and that's exactly what they're pushing for in virtually all their legislation: governmental control and takeover.
That's what it's all about with them, and population control as well. Let's talk election, because I know it's hard to believe, but there are some people who only vote during the presidential election, and they think the other elections just aren't important, but they are. Why should folks get out and vote in 2026?
Well, first off, when you look at the way the Constitution is set up, Article 1 sets up not the president, but the Congress. The president's recognized in Article 2 and the Supreme Court in Article 3. Our founding fathers meant for our nation to be run by citizen legislators in the Congress and later on in the Senate. The Senate was initially appointed by state legislators. And then the 17th Amendment, there was direct election of senators. But it is the Congress that has ultimate control over the United States budget. It is the Congress that has abandoned its responsibilities and allowed this administrative deep state to explode, where we have over 3 million federal employees and over 400 agencies, and all these NGOs are taking money. Congress has allowed that. So in many ways, the congressional election, whether we realize it or not, and the senatorial elections are just as important, if not more important, than the presidential election. As I said in earlier interviews, It may be that President Trump is gutting the Department of Education, and he should do that, and he's done that by executive order. But unless Congress has the guts to kill it by law, it could come back the next time a Democrat takes over. So these congressional elections, I want your folks to understand, are just as, if not more important than the presidential election. I'm running for the U.S. Senate in part because of that, and I hope we can get all the support we can from your viewers and listeners, and I would encourage everybody to go to Brown4, that's brownfornc.com, and pitch in and help if you can. But we have to understand that if we just go to sleep and go to bed and don't pay any attention to the elections that are in the off year, not only might we find weak Republicans in office, as we have in North Carolina right now in the U.S. Senate by the senior senator, but you might get Democrats there. And if you get Democrats, if the Democrats take over control of the House of Representatives, they will impeach President Trump again and waste his last 2 years. So these midterm elections are among the most important in history. They're as important as the presidential elections, and I encourage everyone to go out and vote for a conservative America First candidate.
Mm-hmm. And do research as well. Now, you're out there on the campaign trail. You're somewhere. Every time I look on Facebook, you are somewhere, which is absolutely amazing. And I also noticed that you encourage people to ask you questions. And that's what you have to do, because we are hiring you. I wish I could be in the job of hiring you. But anyway, as in the state of North Carolina, you guys you're hiring your next senator. And it's extremely important you find out what they're about and ask questions.
Yeah. Ask questions and also examine the track record of the candidate. Is the candidate been America First for some time? Has the candidate been MAGA? Has the candidate been pro-Trump, or has the candidate been something else? Everybody needs to do their homework and prayerfully consider the history of the candidate before a decision is made.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to have another remark about South Carolina. I'm bragging on them like crazy. So there was a huge event here in town this past weekend, and they actually, the Confederacy, they had a remake on that. I didn't get to see the whole thing because we had to be somewhere else. But I'm just going to tell you, this place is really rich in history. We actually went, visited a home. I can't think of the name of the home now. It's right here in Abbeville, South Carolina. And the tour guide was awesome. And I thought he might be a conservative. And so I did say something to see if he was. And I said, well, if they would just teach history like they used to, then all these wonderful things about the Confederacy would not be hidden. And boy, he went on a tangent. He's a conservative. He said, yeah, he said, that's my job. I'm out here teaching the real history.
Yeah, and like Santayana said, and Churchill repeated, those who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat it. And when you tear down monuments and when you discourage reenactments, you are wiping history off the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. And we need to know history for the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it is a tyrannical communistic approach to eradicate history. When the Bolsheviks took over in Russia, the first thing they did was annihilate the czars and everything, all memory and history of the czarist regime. And this sort of thing happens over and over again, because the reason for that is they want to indoctrinate. And you can't indoctrinate someone who has an understanding of mistakes that have been made in the past can be made in the future.
Well, the remark was made at the event, we don't tear down statues here.
Right.
I was so glad to hear that. I looked at Bill and I said, we're in the right spot. I love it here. Okay, Don, call it a day. Thank you so much for everything you do for enlightening folks and getting that information out there. And again, I'm going to say this one more thing before we go. Homeschool children are the best. And that's because Absolutely. They don't have this nonsense of the educational system going on in their homes. But thank you again, Don, for everything you do. Folks, going ahead, the website one more time, donate to his campaign. What's the website?
Brown, BROWN4FORNC.com. Brown4NC.com. Please come on and donate as much as you can and sign up to help with our campaign also. We need your help. That's the only way we're going to get through this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for everything you do. And thank you guys so much for watching. We definitely appreciate it. Continue sending emails, Donna at donnasedge.com.